Hey, welcome back to Vox Terra. Today, let me start with a headline from Grist. Actually, no, first let me start with thanking my subscribers, those clicking the like button, and especially my two patrons at Patreon, Bella Lagrissi and Environmental Coffee House. So starting with Grist, U.S. Senate passes historic climate bill, the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. It includes $369 billion for energy security and clean energy, as well as subsidies to the Affordable Care Act. Now here I want you to notice that phrase energy security, and that's the one red flag in this bill. But this bill, I want to point out, even though I'm going to offer some criticism, environmental groups largely view this as a big victory, but all seem to be on the same page with this criticism I'm going to share with you later. Well, one thing to keep in mind is this bill passed with no Republican support, 51 Democratic votes to 50 Republican votes against, and it came about after a compromise and a lot of negotiating with Democratic Senator Joe Manchin. And that too I'll get back to when I get to the whole part about the one red flag or the warning in this bill. Well, citing the NRDC or Natural Resource Defense Council as well as the Guardian, this increase in spending is going to be on renewable energy and that kind of thing is going to be more than offset by the new revenue being pulled in. And that will be brought in by the new corporate tax minimum, a 1% excise tax on stock buybacks, and stricter IRS enforcement of tax laws. And it's believed these measures will bring in $739 billion, as well as reduce the federal deficit by $300 billion. Now, the inflation reduction part comes in. Well, some economists believe that lowering the federal deficit will reduce inflation. Also, another belief that how this would lower inflation is that the bill targets the high cost of medicine, or tries to anyway. So one thing it has in there is this provision allowing for Medicare to finally be able to bargain with the pharmaceutical industry, as opposed to the pharmaceutical industry dictating to the government, here's the price you pay. And many believe this not allowing the federal government to bargain, or the Medicare to bargain with the pharmaceutical industry, is why Americans pay so high of prices for their medicine. Higher, I believe, than people pay in other countries for the same medicine. In addition to that allowing for bargaining, the bill also caps Medicare payments for medicines or pharmaceuticals at $2,000 a year. Now, the third way people believe this will reduce the inflation or lower inflation in the long run anyway is by that transition towards cleaner, more renewable energy. Look, we see it now. Oil and gas prices just go up, they go down. Fuel costs go up and down, but hopefully the idea here is you set up that renewable infrastructure, solar, wind, etc. You got your energy storage backup and that kind of thing, and it'll be a more stable pricing situation. Now, Mitch McConnell and others have criticized it, saying, the inflation reduction is going to be modest or minimal, and there may be some truth in that, but I want to point out that that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, remember, this thing was a reconciliation bill, a budget reconciliation bill. That was the only way it could get passed, with really tight margins in the Congress. Well, a budget reconciliation bill has a lot of procedural rules governing what can and cannot be in it. So one example of this self-fulfilling prophecy here, listen to this one. A proposal to limit insulin costs was blocked by 43 Republicans on those procedural grounds. Okay, the climate provisions, why we really want this thing with our heating planet and our very polluted planet. Citing the Guardian, this bill will reduce America's planet heating emissions by about 40% by 2030. Well, that's a heck of a lot. And citing Grist, which cites independent studies, which I checked into that cites to Princeton, Zero Lab estimates that the IRA, or the Inflation Reduction Act, would slash approximately 6.3 billion metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions over the course of the next decade. 6.3 billion tons. Remember, that stuff is all bad to breathe in. That's a real objective achievement. And speaking of bad to breathe in, prevent up to 3,894 premature deaths per year by 2030. Natural Resource Defense Council cites incentives to expand wind and solar, funding to help cut the carbon footprint of commercial buildings, heavy industries like steel, chemicals, and cement. Help for homeowners to purchase energy-efficient appliances like heat pumps, and here we're talking about building electrification. Electric vehicle tax credits for new and used vehicles. I love that used one because, first of all, not everybody's budgeted for a new vehicle regardless of how much tax credit you're getting, and second, it's really really nice to reuse things. That's one of our calls, really, from the environmental movement going decades back. Reduce, reuse, recycle. This whole design for obsolescence, throw stuff out, everything made to break down and get a new one, is also driving this climate crisis. There's also money in there to help farmers and set aside for forest protections. And in terms of the farmers, it looks like it's a transition towards what we might call organic or just lower chemical farming, as well as what National Resource Defense Council calls traditional farming methods, opposed to just this massive spray herbicides and pesticides and the soil's dead. And Earth Justice also pointed out in their article all the money, all the help towards local communities, what they call frontline communities, disenfranchised communities, communities of color, and help with things really nobody would argue with, like air pollution monitoring. We all should know what kind of air pollution we're breathing in, shouldn't we? Coastal protection. Well, it seems like a wise idea to protect the coast regardless of what you think about anything else. And that could include, again, natural solutions like planting mangroves or just allowing natural vegetative buffers. Okay, so back to that caveat or that warning from the environmental groups, even though they're all largely supporting it. Citing Earth Justice again, the bill contains, quote, egregious fossil fuel concessions, from mandatory lease sales to carbon capture tax subsidies. So mandatory lease sales, I mean, you've got to sell leases to oil and gas, I suppose, maybe offshore or public lands. The carbon capture they're talking about is maybe another one of those ways to kind of perpetuate fossil fuels by trying to design technologies to kind of capture some of the emissions rather than just switching away, because that technology so far is fairly unproven. And they point out, most importantly, these harmful provisions threaten to entrench the fossil fuel interests. So you see what I'm saying? It entrenches them, because that money they get isn't just sitting there helping shareholders. It's also used to then sponsor politicians, build ties with media, and really shape the public discourse. And that gets us to why that provision is in there. Well, okay, here's what happened. In my opinion, you go to Open Secrets, which I've shown you before. You got millions of dollars coming each year to fund politicians, campaigns at the federal level from the fossil fuel industry. The bulk of that, or the lion's share, is going towards Republicans, hence none of them supporting it. But, and also Republicans who have tried to come on board with climate action have often gotten primaried, successfully so, and their primary challengers also funded by fossil fuel interests. Now, Democrats, while freer of that interest, are not all the same. Joe Manchin is actually one of the top fossil fuel recipients, and he's the one who all the wrangling or negotiating has been going on with. Probably a major reason why there's these new concessions to the fossil fuel industry in this bill. Now, based on reports I heard about so-called progressive Democrats calling for Manchin to get stripped of his committee chairmanships, I'm imagining that's partly why he finally came on board, was these kind of threats. So hence it's that bargain between, hey, I got to protect these fossil fuel industries that are helping me, and you progressives might take away my committee chairmanships. I got to protect my immediate job here. And that's really how this world works, unfortunately. You've got Democrats who are not as in bed with the fossil fuel industries like Obama, Biden, who are basically promoting what Obama called all of the above. They're going to promote fossil fuels, but they're also going to promote green energy and try to, raise auto fuel efficiency standards, make things more efficient and less polluting. And then you got Republicans. Our classic example was Trump, who came in there and just scoffed at all that environmental stuff, walked away from the Paris Agreement and just promoted fossil fuels, call it energy independence. So that's really been our choice historically, really, as far as I can tell. Reagan versus Carter. Carter, solar panels on the White House. Reagan comes in, takes them down. And then you've got, within the Democrats, and I don't see anybody analogous to this in the Republicans, you got politicians like Bernie Sanders who are willing to come out and say, hey, our society, our media, our politics, it's all dominated by these vested, powerful interests. And now, to paraphrase them or put it in my own words, they use their might in the media and in politics to perpetuate their own industry and really hold down competition. So that's another thing so important about this bill. Remember that, I don't know if I mentioned to you or not, but there's federal procurement money in there for the post office and other federal agencies to purchase electric vehicles and this low carbon, this and that. And that's important because that'll help those industries. All that money coming in will give them a little more political muscle. And finally, we've got the environmental groups who are supporting this as a victory, but are going to be there saying, hey, stop it with this fossil fuel promotion. So to quote Earth Justice again, Earth Justice will redouble our effort to fight to block a new wave of fossil fuel extraction and pollution and help help to claw back this bill's gifts to the fossil fuel industry. And the fossil fuel industry is going to be putting up an even bigger fight to claw back this transition away from fossil fuel. So the moral of the story is right now, you really can't vote Republican no matter how you feel about Democrats on other issues. I just don't think it's a good idea. If you are in the Republican Party, then you know what? Try to make it greener. Campaign against the fossil fuel industry. Let people know, hey, you know what? All this climate denial, climate dismissal, it's not truly conservative. It's just that industry wrapping itself in a conservative cloak, grabbing that mantle. And support those environmental groups and help support my channel. Give it a like, give it a thumbs up, give it a positive comment. Constructive criticism, that's cool too. And I'm especially thankful to the few of you who have actually taken the time to become patrons of Patreon and actually help support this really time-consuming, yet I think important work I'm trying to do here. And hey, until next time, as always, peace be with you.